Precinct, so you all have a chance to meet them tonight. But you have a moment to have some coffee, have a donut, ask a police question. So we'll get started around 5:30. But if you want to talk to any of the officers about any issues at your business or place of business or Capitol Hill, feel free. Thanks for coming. Help yourself to donuts and coffee. We'll get started in a while. I'm not going to remember. There'll be a test tonight. My name is Michael Wells. I'm the Executive Director of the Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce. And we want to thank you all for coming out tonight for Cops Talk Shops. So if we can try and keep the center aisle clear, we're taping this tonight for members that can't be here this evening so that they can watch at a later time online. So if you ever, you can remember that. Tonight's event is put together by the Chamber's Clean and Safe Committee. We have some committee members here, Paul Waskin from Broadway Video, Audrey Vanis from Babeland, James Carney from the Capitol Hill Presbyterian, and Polly Guy and Nikki Dubois from Starbucks. So the Clean and Safe Committee is an important piece of what we do with the Chamber, making sure that our neighborhood is clean and safe as a place to do business, a place to live and work and play. So we wanted an opportunity tonight for you to meet the new leadership of the East Precinct. And Captain Commander Ron Wilson is here with us tonight, our new commander of the East Precinct, and Lieutenant Matt Allen. So they'll be here tonight too to answer questions. But we have some panelists to talk about some specific subjects. So one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is problems we may be having with shoplifting or panhandling. We'll also talk about no trespass agreements for your business, how to get that signed up, and you'll have an opportunity to have a no trespass agreement signed tonight if you don't have one. And we'll also talk about mentally ill in businesses and how best to handle situations without escalating things in your business and how to talk to your employees about that. So I want to thank Starbucks for bringing us some treats tonight. Donuts, yes, it's donuts. And so I doubt you'll see any pictures of the police with donuts in their hands. Stay well aware. But coffee and donuts are in the back. Please help yourself, and some cookies as well. So, and let's see, I have a couple things to hit tonight. So, if you're not a member of the Chamber, tonight is a perfect opportunity to join. Michelle Hitler, who's standing there in back. Michelle is our new membership coordinator. We have membership applications here, and we can answer any questions you have about what the Chamber does. And I'll quickly tell you what the Chamber does. We advocate for Capitol Hill as a place to work and live. We talk to public agencies about issues of transportation, issues of safety, and we try and make the Hill the best environment for an economically vital neighborhood. That's what we do. And we offer networking opportunities. We do monthly mixers, and we do events like this. We're advocates for the neighborhood, for the City of Seattle, the Office of Economic Development, Sound Transit, all of those things. So that's what the Chamber does, and your membership helps us do all of those things. So if anyone's interested, Michelle is back there to talk to you, and we'd be happy to talk to you more. So the video for tonight's event will be posted online on the Chamber website. It's probably on yourcapitolhill.com as well. And so I've introduced Commander Wilson and Lieutenant Allen. I'll also introduce some of our officers tonight. Dan Nelson is right here on the end, Casey Sundin, and Chris Brown. So this is going to be a question and answer discussion. We're going to start with Chris talking about some shoplifting and panhandling issues. We'll move on to Dan talking about some mental illness issues on the street. And then Casey will talk about our no trespass piece. So Chris will start. Feel free to answer questions. There's no specific question time. You can answer questions anytime you'd like. So there we go. Any questions before we start?
And we have a microphone for that we can pass around.
For the questions?
For the questions in the audience. We have
Yeah,
a microphone.
hopefully we won't need it, but I can always, it's a small enough.
It'll be easier for the video.
Oh, I see, okay. Okay,
Right,
great.
board member. All right, fantastic. Hi, Chris Brown. I've been with the police department for just about 7 years. Part of the community police team for Edward Sector, which encompasses Capitol Hill, First Hill, Kessler Terrace, and Little Sac. Prior to being a police officer, I was a juvenile probation counselor for King County Superior Court. Did that for 5 years. And prior to that, I was assistant director for a community facility back in Boston, working on deinstitutionalizing juvenile offenders. So I come typically more from the community service side of things. I've been an officer here for almost 7. More than 20% of the officers actually lives within the city here. So happy to call Seattle home. We were kind of looking at the agenda for tonight and realized that a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is really difficult to compartmentalize into specific pieces. So we may see the mic going back and forth between the three of us here. Because a lot of the issues that our communities are facing and a lot of the challenges that we all try to overcome together as a community are really intertwined, especially when it comes to dealing with some of our street youth that we try to reach out to, as well as dealing with mental health issues, and some of the tacit ancillary crimes that come along with that. So that's pretty much what that is. So I don't really have a canned speech when it comes to trespassing per se, or panhandling per se, or even homelessness per se, other than, I guess a good touch-off point, something that I think would probably be a good jump-off point, I guess, would be the panhandling issue, or challenge, as it were. In of itself, not illegal. I think most of us know that in terms of civility laws in Seattle. We don't have a illegal to panhandle. It's perfectly legal to do with certain restrictions, and those are outlined in the SOCs to kind of talk about. However, it does become an issue where people's passage is blocked, they're going in and out of stores, along the sidewalk. They feel like they're being compelled to give money or give something that they wouldn't typically do. Other than that, that's kind of where things go from just bad behavior more into the criminal realm. And we can discuss that. There's some nuances that you guys want to discuss about that. Throw it out. Starting off from there, if anyone has any questions from that, but if not, then I think we're just kind of going around. Yes, sir?
How you doing? Hi. Since you said something that's important property, I was working around in the streets and youth in the streets.
Nice.
And I also happen to be a homeless youth who suffers from mental illnesses, so this is a very important topic to me. So I guess I have a couple questions. First, does Seattle have like an aggressive panhandling ordinance in the sense that whereas if you talk to someone as opposed to just holding a sign, whereas like holding a sign is just panhandling, but once you physically communicate with someone, that becomes aggressive panhandling? Is that how it works in Seattle?
That's a really good question, and it's perfect that you asked that, because that's exactly the point that I was getting at. And first off, you guys are a great organization. You guys do really, really good work, so thank you for doing what you do. As far as aggressive panhandling is concerned, yes, and it falls under the pedestrian interference statute. That's the important part. Like I said, it is not illegal to spank. It's not. That's how you're getting your cash to feed the dog, or feed your girlfriend, or feed your boyfriend, or do whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, asking somebody for money isn't a problem. It becomes a problem if they say no and the asker follows or harasses or hinders or blocks their passage on the street, or in their behavior or in their demeanor, it gets to the point where they feel like they're compelled, like they have to. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm off dude and I'm walking down, you're like, hey dude, you got a quarter? I really want a Dick's Burger. And I'm like, nah, not today, man. All I got is my debit card. And you're like, all right. And I'm like, all right. And we walk away. No harm, no foul. There's no problem with that. There's nothing wrong with that. If I say, no, I don't really have any change, I haven't hit the store yet, and you step in front of me and block my way, like, dude, I'm trying to get by you, and you get in my way, or you follow me down the street, that's where it can become a problem. Yes, and that in and of itself, that type of behavior, if there is somebody who's willing to be a victim, and a police officer does respond and somebody's stopped, that actually can become a misdemeanor.
Actually, it's actually kind of odd to come out of it.
Sure.
I find it a difficult question to ask because I'm not trying to be insulting to ask this, but I experience that myself. That typically police officers make me very uncomfortable, even if like I'm not doing anything. A police officer coming up to encounter me tends to make me uncomfortable because I've run freight trains across the country, and police officers all wear the same uniforms. They all look the same. Yep. So like cognitively in my brain, whether or not that police officer is a completely nice person or not, because of the negative experiences I have had with police officers, since you're coming up in a uniform, I automatically not trying to judge you, but a little bit on edge, because I've been patterned to think that because not all police officers, this is police officers' fault, but there's a certain amount of segregation that happens to homeless people where they feel like second-class citizens. And then when you're lowered in that position, it's really hard to like not be defensive when any person comes up to you or anything, or someone says no to you. It's not that they're upset. I think the problem here is not so much that they're upset that someone says no, but when you get no acknowledgement all day long and people just walk by you and ignore you, and then like you're just waiting for acknowledgement, and then maybe that person didn't say it in a correct or like okay way that was like maybe a little rude. Okay, I don't think that they should have reacted that way, but maybe a little rude. But since they haven't been acknowledged all day, they lash out in frustration. I agree that's not okay, and that's not how you should handle yourself in a social situation. But I feel like a lot of times when a homeless person is in trouble, a police officer can tend to be more inclined to believe the person who isn't homeless over the person who is,
Sure.
and whether they're right or wrong. Maybe the homeless person was completely wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say either. But I feel like a major problem is that there's just that lack of voice. So if a police officer shows up, they expect that they've already lost. And I think a lot of these things are symptoms of the problems of homelessness, or like panhandling or mental illness and people wandering around the streets. And I feel like the core issues of how do we fix homelessness is not being addressed, and also how do we foster a better relationship between our police officers and our homeless kids, because I feel like if police officers could trust homeless kids could trust police officers, I feel like the issues that exist between police officers and homeless people just wouldn't exist anymore, because they would feel like empowered, they would feel like they're equal. They wouldn't feel like, oh no, here's a police officer, he's going to persecute me because I'm homeless. Instead, they feel like, here's a police officer, he's going to face me just like if I had a house or I had these things. Like, I think a lot of these kids need to be empowered. They need to feel like that they're significant, that they're not just going to be trampled over and the system is just going to like throw them away. Because I felt like that a lot. I can honestly say I feel like that a lot. Like I've just been thrown away, like I'm a reject, because people just like it's intense. So I think a lot more needs to be done in that way. Because like I don't think laws like these are effective because they shuffle kids around. So if you trespass someone from a place, they kind of just get shuffled around. They keep going from place to place, and then they have nowhere to go.
Right.
And then it only creates that. It only like reciprocates that problem, because they just that same feeling. Where can I go? If I can't be here, where can I go?
Right.
And we don't really have it. There's no real answer to that. I mean, there are shelters and things and all these things, but we're told that there's just not enough resources. And I believe that there is totally enough resources.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be looking more into that. I definitely think that a much more empathetic approach is needed.
I agree. If I can respond to that, I mean, man, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of different things. And I'm just going to say, just from my experience, my short time on being a police officer, and having spent the majority of my professional career working with juveniles more than in the adult criminal system, I was also a bike officer up here on the hill for the last 4 years. I've been in CPT for about 1.5 years now. But the last 4 years, I was one of the 6 bike cops that we have in the entire East Precinct up on the hill, okay? And so I'd just about 85–90% of my contacts, my daily interactions and conversations and handing out Dick's dollars and giving cigarettes to are our street kids. And I think you're absolutely right. And you know exactly how we travel around. We've got our seasonals, we've got our train hoppers, we've got our people that are coming back and forth from the Rainbow Festival. Folks are coming down from the Ave when it gets a little hot up there. They park down here for a little bit, might go down to the Blade for a little while, and come back up. We get to know our kids pretty darn well. Pretty darn well. And you're absolutely right, especially from from our seasonal kids that are coming in from other parts of the country or coming in from California, per se. They're just maybe trying to head on to Alaska to go to the fishing boats or whatnot. Yeah, sometimes the interactions aren't going to be so great, and I'm not going to lie, sometimes my interactions with some of our kids aren't so great. And it's our job, and it's our responsibility as police officers, and quite frankly, just as citizens and fellow human beings, to try to treat each other with respect. I think you're absolutely right. It's unfortunate that we're coming up with initiatives and really having to codify this, because this is just human behavior we're talking about. I know about PSKS, we refer to people to you guys all the time. I mean, each one of us, frankly, it's a perfect example. We all carry, cards like this. These are our resource cards. These are what we give out to our kids. This is, here are all the shelters that you can call 24/7. Look, I think, New Horizon, Catholic Community, University Street. Oh, look, PSKS is right on there. You see what I'm saying? And this is important stuff that we all have to do. So it's not a big part of what we do as first responders isn't just the boots and the enforcement and telling kids that they can't sit where there's a no sit lie zone and hauling kids in for shoplifting and whatnot. Oftentimes, as it is in Seattle, and let's be honest about it, Seattle's a destination city. Everybody knows that we have excellent human resources here. And I know from your time on the street, my time talking with kids from the street, people come to Seattle as a destination city because they know that the resources here are better than in some other cities. It's true, okay? And because you've got officers around in the street that carry these cards, that actually do a lot of this frontline outreach, that's the stuff you don't really hear about. And it does go both ways, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've pulled knives, sharp implements, objects, stabby, sticky, pointy, pokey things off of kids that wanted to do bad things to me as well. So I have to be just as vigilant as you do, and that's my responsibility to not say, oh, I'm just dealing with another street kid who's got a knife that's going to stick me in the back of the head. I have to say, hey, this is a kid who might be down on his or her luck, might not have the resources, might not have the resources available to them, right? So that onus is on me just as much as it is on you guys. So I agree. I mean, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but I think dialogues like this are really, really important. I applaud you for being brave enough to stand up and just say what's on your mind, man, because there's nothing wrong with what you said. You're 100% right. You know, the police have to take responsibility for how we do our interactions with our kids on the street, just as much as the kids do as well. And I think that you'll find, if you talk about some of the officers that are out there, everybody knows who the officers are on Third Watch that work really, really well with the kids, who give out the Dick's dollars, who can give breaks here and there. Same with the Second Watch bike guys, same with the First Walk officers, you know. That's how it works.
I'm sorry, as you said, I'm being honest, I don't want to be argumentative, I kind of want to give a rebuttal to what you say.
Sure.
I've been traveling since I was 16, and I'm now 24, I've been in Seattle so many times, which is completely correct, there's a lot of resources here.
Mhm.
So it's a good place to relax for me a little bit while I'm riding, just got done riding trains, it's a good safe place for me to relax. I'm gonna be all right being homeless, someone's gonna like, oh, specifically just because I'm homeless.
Right.
But those cars you pointed out to me, I've encountered so many Seattle police officers from so many things, from smoking weed, to sleeping in public,
Mhm.
to like all these basic things. And to be honest with you, they've never handed me one of those cars. In fact, I've had guns pointed at me twice. Instead
Okay.
of being introduced with cars, I got introduced with guns. Because I own a dog, and even though I'm well controlled my dog, it terrifies the shit out of me. They react, like, they have gotten me so triggered. It's like, it's scary, man. It's scary because I've never been like, that's terrifying. I've never, like, Seattle's the only place where a police officer pulled a gun simply because I owned a dog and because he barked at him once to let me know that he was there. The guy didn't think, he didn't react, he didn't try to talk to me, he just pulled out his gun and pointed it right at my dog.
Okay.
And I was like, and then like, and that's something that's like, that's scary. I don't like, when you have situations like that, it's really hard for me to want to have anything to do with the Seattle police because I'm terrified. I'm terrified. And I understand that's one officer, but that sets a hell of a connotation,
Mhm.
like in my mind, because I have to be afraid that maybe there are other officers. I feel like, unfortunately, and this is where I go on my own personal tangent, I want to walk away a little bit from KSKS a little bit and say that I feel like I'm looking at what needs to be handled here is accountability for the police. I feel like the police, not every police officer, I've met plenty of nice SPD officers, I really have, who haven't done anything to me other than just talk to me and tell me I can't sleep there, and not even do anything. That's not that they're all that. That was a one-time example of a police officer using excessive force that I have, of using what I would consider to be excessive force on me. And I'm sorry, okay, sorry.
No, I think you're doing fine. And you know, my commitment to you is that I'd be more than happy to talk with you offline as soon as it's done for as long as you want. Absolutely.
I just feel like I don't think every police officer is a bad person,
Mhm.
but I really feel like the police right now are dangerous. You guys scare me just as much as the things you're protecting me from.
Okay.
And I feel like that needs to be addressed because a police officer should not be something you're afraid of. When a police officer comes, even if you committed a crime, you should not be afraid because they're not there to hurt you. They're there to enforce the protect the law.
I agree.
And I don't feel like that's done as much as it should be. And I think when officers do that, there's not much penalty for them. So why should we? I guess why such harsh penalties for all these people, but no penalties for the police? And I feel like that needs to be addressed as well.
That's fair. That's fair.
You know, I just like to say there's a very important conversation, the natural tension sometimes between a business district and issues around panhandling or homelessness or the dynamic that we live with in Capitol Hill and on Pike Pine on Broadway. And so I'm really appreciative of these conversations we hear, but I would like to hear some businesses' responses about what they're looking for in terms of this issue for the police too. So I know that businesses, as a former business owner on Broadway, I know that businesses struggle with exactly how best to handle the issues on the street. Business owners are not social workers, and they're trying to make sure that they run a district that people feel comfortable with, and yet they don't have necessarily the skills that people in social work would. So therefore, what are the tips and advices that they need to know to try and be better citizens, better business owners, and make sure that their customers feel taken care of by them as well.
Well, just as a business owner, do I have I'm responsible for the sidewalk in front of my business, whether it's snowing or somebody trips or whatever. Do we all have a zero tolerance policy for panhandling? I mean, no matter how polite somebody is, you never know exactly when they're going to start escalating things. The more lenient you are with somebody just sitting right next to your business or a little bit farther away. Over time, I find that they start to get pushier, start coming in using the bathroom. And so that's my second question is, what's the definition of trespassing? It's just somebody I don't want in my business, somebody who's not spending money. I do have business where it's a gallery, so, you know, people don't spend money, they come in and look, so is that trespassing, you know? Things like that.
I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Casey Sundin, police officer. I'm in my 34th year. Worked the street, spent over 20 years as a detective, came back to the street in 03, working a prowler car, walking the footbeat for a few years up here on Broadway. And for about the last 5 years, I've been up in the community police team. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. You know, regarding the sidewalk, and I know what you mean when you're talking about, you know, there's a responsibility for the sidewalk. That's more like a maintenance, you know, keep it clear of snow type thing. Anything else that occurs out there, it's, you know, if there's a problem, it gets confrontational, call us, call 911. We welcome you to do that. Back in the old days, we usually did call 911 as much because everything was analog, everything's digital now, so we encourage you call 911. It's, you know, we have officers here with a lot of experience, like Officer Brownlee, Officer Nelson, you know, who have the experience and the training to deal with different situations on the sidewalk. And so we'll show up for that. As far as the trespassing, and maybe I'll touch on that point right now. We used to have the, what we would call, prior to say summer of 2011, we had the old trespass program. Some of you business owners may remember that. You would get an individual would show up, you'd call 911. If you're part of the program, officers would show up and issue an admonishment, fill out, looks like a little 3x5 card. They would turn it in, tell the individual, you cannot come back at all. Even if they come back and step 1 foot over the property line, they were subject to going to jail, of being arrested. We also, you know, aside from the program, and whether it was the old program, and I'll tell you the difference with the new program, with the both programs, we still have criminal trespass, you know, on the SMC on the books. It's still your business. You get to decide who's going to be there and who isn't going to be there. If there's a problem, even without the trespass program, if we forget about that for a minute, you can still call 911. Officers can still arrive. You're saying, I'm having a problem with this individual, I don't want them on my property anymore. You have the right to ask them to leave. And as officers, we would make a note of that. If there's a problem later, that person comes back, they're subject to arrest. However, now if we go to court, then you as the business owner would be the one who would testify at trial. With the trespass program, a lot of that onus is put on to us, because we're actually, in a sense, acting as your advocate or as your proxy. So no matter which program we have, old or new, we still have criminal trespassing on the SMC. Now, we'll go back to summer of 2011. We have the new program. What changed was, there was some, I should have turned mine off too. You're not calling, are you, Lieutenant? All right, just checking, sir. He's always keeping us on our toes. We had some, back in summer of 2011, we had some legal challenges. And there was legal challenges to the way that the old program was, and changes were made. And what the changes was, now under the new program, is called a trespass warning program. And where before, when just a little 3x5 card was filled out and was filed in our office, the individual who was trespassed didn't get anything. So maybe, you know, after you've been trespassed a few times, you're going, geez, where was I trespassed from? And when or where? Now they're actually issued a written warning. And so now they'll actually get handed a piece of paper, like if you got a warning on a traffic ticket, you get a piece of paper. And what makes a difference now is that once an individual's been warned, they may return to your property if they, you know, if they behave. And behave is as long as they're not breaking any laws or, but remember, you go back and even if it's your property, you can still exclude them for as long as you want, where they don't come back. That's where we have that two aspects, remember I talked about, the warning program and the SMC. So on the warning program, we'll issue a warning, they can come back and do business, whether it's at QFC, whether it's at Dick's Drive-In or wherever, as long as they behave. So really what the difference is now what's being addressed is the individual's behavior, not who they are as a person. You know, it's just like the gentleman that was speaking here earlier and who recently left. Yeah, it's the behavior we're looking at. And, you know, it's as long as you're being good, it's no problem. However, if you've been warned, you come back and you violate any of those conditions, then you're subject to arrest after you've been warned. Did I answer your question there on that? Get an idea? Yes, sir.
Casey, I agree with what you're saying, and I understand. I think the question, the problem that I have. All right, so you guys are trained on how to respond. The question, you know, my worry is, do you have the time? And I'll give you an extreme example. I was trying to leave one of my buildings, and there was, I'd probably describe him more as a chronic inebriant, stuck in the alcove, and I was trying to leave. I couldn't get out the gate because he was laying there. I tried to wake him up. He kind of responded, so I just started pushing my way out. Well, as I was doing that, I started calling 911. The 911 responder said, "Is he attacking you?" No, not right now. Well, can you wait there? Well, I'm trying to go to work. You know, and I was like, how long is the response time? 1, 2, 3 hours? As I was talking, then he got up, then he attacked me, right? I wasn't trying to provoke him, but he knew I was calling 911 as I was leaving. It's an extreme example. Normally doesn't happen. You know, normally people get up, they leave, but it has happened, maybe not to that extreme every time, but there have been altercations where I've had to, you know, try and protect myself. Yeah, he swung at me. I kicked him out in the street of Bourne. You know, I wasn't proud of it, but I was trying to protect myself. Up until that point, the question was, you know, are you being attacked? Well, what does that matter? I can't get out of the building. You know, and managing a lot of buildings, I know that the response time isn't very quick. And that's where I feel like the problem lies, because what's the point of calling 911 if I'm going to have to wait 3 hours for you guys to show up?
You know, what's going on with some of this is that, you know, dispatchers, they're going through a litany of information, because what they're doing is getting information together so they can triage the call. Now, granted, you know, a illegally parked car is going to be way down at the bottom. Somebody maybe who's blocking a doorway is at a higher level. If somebody is getting very confrontational with you, that triage is up a little higher level. And as each higher level goes up, and so does the speed of the response. I mean, obviously, if you've got someone who's getting stabbed, that's going to be a very fast response over an illegally parked car. I didn't know if you had a question, mister. Sorry. You can tell, you know, I pay attention to the boss. Just a couple other things here. But so that's what they're doing as far as the dispatchers. The one thing on the trespass program, you're coming out of an apartment building? Oh, Capitol Hill. Because, you know, right now the new program is only covering actual, like, businesses that are open to the public, privately owned business. However, this city attorney office, they are working on one that will cover, like, the Capitol Hill housing, apartment buildings, other condos, etc. But they're having to write new verbiage for it. Well, your commercial spaces are absolutely covered under this program without a problem. But as far as, that's what's going on. And then also, having a little sign posted, and it doesn't have to be real big, you can shrink it down. And then we usually let officers know, so even in their travels, during their patrol, if they got the chance, they'll come by and check. If they see somebody there, move them along. But as far as the response time, that's why those questions are being asked.
Casey, I know we have another question. But just because you responded to that sign, can you talk about that signage a little bit? I had a couple questions earlier tonight about if there's any specific language that needs to be posted on that signage. What does that sign need to say?
Well, it isn't what the sign needs to say, because it's already on the sign, and we have the signs.
So businesses get the signs from the East Precinct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, yes, and you gotta watch my, I just love that. The reason I say yes and no is, if you're like a Diamond parking lot, they have those real big signs, which we don't have, but those are actually, you get them to the Seattle Neighborhood Group, and I think it costs, I don't know, I think it's less than $10, $7, $8, $9. If you have it for a big parking lot or something like that. For a business, once I sign you up and I have your email, I'm going to email you a PDF of the sign itself. It comes out as 8.5 by 11. City attorney says you can shrink it down. You can shrink it down to a smaller size, just don't make a postage stamp out of it, because it still has to be read. And then that way, if it gets destroyed, torn down, you can put another one up. So that's where my yes and no comes into that. And the verbiage is already written on there, as far as putting it on.
Great.
Okay. Joe, back here.
Hello, I'm Steven with Black Coffee Co-op. My statement is more of a statement than a question, and it's kind of addressing what you said and also bringing what our friend Cody said. In that I think if our first reaction to a situation is to contact 911 as you encouraged, that it discourages taking steps in our other time to build community, to build networks of solidarity with our neighbors, to realize that you could ask people that are nearby. Somebody like me approaching a person that doesn't have a badge, doesn't have a gun, has a really good chance of solving situations, and I do frequently, and we depend on each other. But if our first psychological impulse is, there's a situation, I should call 911, it's a lot less likely that we're going to find each other, look each other in the eyes and say, I can help you. These people who we're coming up to with badges, guns, if they just enter the system, just from a call, they might end up in prison, they might have priors. It's not just asking them to walk away. You might get them locked up like an animal. These are people with hopes, dreams, fears, and love like us. I can ask them to leave. You could. We all have neighbors.
So a follow-up on that. So I know, Dan, that you deal with mental illness issues.
Yep.
And I know as a former store owner, and I'm sure that other business owners probably have some stories about having folks in the store who seem to have mental illness issues. Now I know when I had a staff at my bookstore, I had a hard time trying to train my staff on how to deal with mental illness issues with folks. Is there advice for store employees when they're dealing with mental illness issues that they may not feel prepared to deal with?
Sure. Well, first off, to introduce myself, I'm Dan Nelson. I work in the Crisis Intervention Unit. Before going down there, I was up here in the East Precinct for about 6 years. I was on bikes with Officer Brown over there. So first, I'm going to start by saying mental illness is kind of a broad definition, and we should really stick away from stigmatizing people with mental illness, and we should be focusing on their specific behaviors. So if somebody is in a store and they're exhibiting behaviors of having some kind of a mental illness or mental health related issue, again, first and foremost, we gotta make sure we treat them with dignity and respect. And understand that if somebody's in crisis, or it's because they're not in control of their surroundings, okay? That they're very scared. Their emotionality is very, very high, and their rational thinking is very low. So if you shoot a bunch of questions at them, they're not going to have the mental capacity at the time to process through and answer those correctly. You should always gauge safety. What type of behaviors is this person exhibiting? Is it, very assaultive, dangerous behavior? If that's the case, then I would say probably be better for your employees not to try and intervene with them. And call us out. You can always request a crisis intervention trained officer respond to the scene. If it's an ongoing issue, you can request to have the crisis intervention team out to follow up with a specific person, and we'll do some problem solving with them. In our unit, we actually have a mental health professional who's contracted through the Downtown Emergency Service Center. He responds out to the field with us. What that allows us to do is do assessments in the field, and it's also a referral point. If the person's not working with any kind of community services or mental health provider, he can kind of act as a de facto case manager for them, get them into services or give them housing or to food programs, so we can get this person out of crisis. So again, a lot of crisis is environmental issues which we can control. If the major safety risks aren't there, I would just very calmly and politely state what your expectations are. You know, this is the behavior you're exhibiting, this is why it's a problem, and this is what I would like to see happen. Have your employee gauge that response, and again, given the response, if the person escalates again, withdraw, call the police, will come out and work with that person. If the person is receptive and starts communicating, and you can have an open dialogue and start getting the problems fixed. Would be, I guess, one way of doing that. Did I answer the question? Is that, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
I spoke to you guys a little bit earlier, excuse me, a little bit earlier. For those who don't know, I do work for the Extravagance. And it's a big perennial problem in front of my establishment. Repeat. People come by, the same people every day, same transients, panhandlers, kids to adults, you name it. How can I keep the same ones from, obviously down the sidewalk? You mentioned that, you know, down the sidewalk, nothing you can do about it. Walk on my property, I approach them, they leave, come back on the property, I call 911, you guys show up, maybe they're on the sidewalk. How do I make them stop doing this, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? Is there a way in the trespass program, or, I mean, because like I said, 90% of the time somebody shows up, they're on the sidewalk again, but they're still harassing every one of my customers. I have a high volume, you know, 20, 30 customers are approached in the 2 minutes it takes you to get there, which is, you know, 2 minutes is great, but we're still constantly turning people over. So I was just wondering what can me and some of the other ones, businesses who get the same people every day, 10 times a day, and we go out and talking to them, and eventually I get told too. What can we do?
Well, if the person's suffering from some kind of mental health related issue, you can certainly have the officer request a report and have it routed to the crisis intervention unit. Just describe the behavior and give a description of the person, and we'll assign that case. An officer and the MHP will go out, try and make contact with this person. Again, while they're not in crisis, and try and figure out what is the, why is the person acting in this manner? Maybe again, they're transient, they don't have access to food services or housing, and that's all stuff that can be addressed. We have a new crisis solution center down at 16th and 1600 South Main Street. It's operated by Downtown Emergency Service Center, and also a crisis diversion facility. So when we are arresting people for trespassing, that's one of the qualifying offenses. So instead of sending people with mental health related issues to jail where they're not getting their needs met, we can send to a crisis diversion facility, which is staffed with medical staff and mental health professionals, so we can start getting their needs met. You know, if somebody in crisis, probably the worst place you can send them as a result of that crisis is to jail, because when they're in crisis and they go to jail, now they're going to start getting victimized in jail. So we're trying to divert more and more folks over to the crisis diversion facility and crisis solution center when it's not at that point. But I would always encourage you to call 911, have them do a request to watch. You know, this is the time the guy's kind of in the area. Again, like Officer Sunday and Officer Brown, he said in roll calls, they'll put that out to all the district officers. And I know when I was in roll calls, you know, I listed if it happened in my area, I'd write down the address, and during my downtime when I wasn't responding to calls, I'd make a point of going and hanging out in front of the business. I'd go write my reports there, I'd go on a foot beat out in the area, just kind of make my presence known. So still report it, and you can always do a request to watch and just get us out there to try and address it.
When you're saying request to watch, so you just call 911, you say, can you send an officer with crisis experience? What did you say? Can you just explain that again?
If it's an in-progress emergency, you can always request a crisis intervention trained officer, and the dispatchers have us all asterisked out or whatever it is in their system. So if it's a crisis-related type call, they'll always try and send one of us out. If your request one's not available, they might pull one from a different precinct and have them respond to that. If it's non-emergent, we're talking about the repeated trespasser, and it's more of a problem-solving project, like this person keeps coming in, You can always have a report written and have it flagged to the crisis intervention team. That will come through our queue, and we will read it. Just to put a little scope on it, there's 2 officers, a sergeant, an MHP, and annually we screen about 7,000 cases a year. And then we assign those cases out and we do problem solving on those things. And a lot of those are recurring people at different addresses. So while it might be every once in a while opportunity at your place, it might also be happening at his place and his business. And so the same name will keep floating around, and so then we'll be able to identify that and address it.
Don't be shy, folks. Yeah.
So I have operated a business on Broadway for 22 years, and I've had only one break-in so far, which was last month, and which is good, I guess, in one way, but one is too many. And so it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and the police officers that came, they took some fingerprinting and all that. The burglars had made a big mess, but there was a slightly bigger mess for me to clean up later on. But what I found out was it takes about 2 months to get any kind of fingerprint report or any kind of trace. I was actually surprised by that timeline. And so my question is really, how many of these burglars you actually end up catching? Is there a percentage that you can put on and say, we get 50% of them or we don't get any of them?
So I'll try to answer that. So going back to we encourage the officers as much as possible that when they go to burglaries, car prowls, whatever, or any other crime scene, that they check for latent prints and find out if they can recover any prints. The timeline sending those through to the print analysis and to the people that handle all that can be a remarkably long amount of time, depending on what the nature of the crime is. Something that's a very serious crime, a homicide, would certainly expedite that because there's a tremendous amount of workload that's there. So when we get that, I get a report every month that comes in that gives me a feedback on how many times officers went to calls that they tried to recover prints, and then from the prints that are recovered, how many are identifiable to a known person that's on file. So that's the other side is that those prints that we capture have to be, the person that owns those prints have to be in our system somewhere. So we have a mechanism that's called AFIS, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification Section, that it's a database that takes prints from that agencies throughout the entire United States enter into it. So it could be that a person who was arrested at one time in New York City had their fingerprints taken at that time, then that would be in the database, and if they're here and they commit a crime, and get a registration on that identification. So there's nearly 300 million people in the United States, and not all of them have had their fingerprints taken. So there's the challenge we face. Now going to the other part of the question is when you ask how many burglars are caught, we routinely are apprehending individuals that are involved in burglaries. What makes it tough is if we have 10 burglaries, is then how many is, we arrest 2 people, we don't know sometimes whether those 2 individuals are responsible for all 10 of the burglaries or if they're responsible for maybe 4 of those burglaries. And unless we get cooperation and other evidence that can help tie it in, cooperation from the subject that's arrested that admits to doing these, then it's sometimes challenging to find out when we arrest the person how many individual burglaries they have been responsible for. We've been pretty successful in the department up here on Capitol Hill, also in the East Precinct, of individuals that we've caught that are responsible for multiple burglaries, car prowls, and auto thefts. But it's a challenge, and it continues to go on. And when we look at burglaries, we have different classifications now that we do on burglaries. We have the residential burglaries, we have commercial burglaries, and we also have burglaries that are now listed under our system when you have a secured parking facility. Now going into there is categorized as a burglary if there's a crime committed in there. So I don't have a number to tell you that we arrested 35 burglars this month, and they were responsible for 40 burglaries.
You take the fingerprint and then match it, try to eliminate the number of burglaries, and in the long run, you can say, okay, we got 50% off.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
When you catch someone, assuming you have their fingerprint,
Right.
and then you have the data that you took from other burglaries, the fingerprint, and then you match and see, okay, they don't have to accept this.
Oh, yeah, we cross.
Accept or confess to other burglaries. We need to figure that out.
We can if their fingerprints are out of their scenes, but it may be that they don't necessarily leave fingerprints at every scene that they've burglarized. So that's the challenge. And the report that I get shows the number of burglaries that we had that particular month, how many times that there were prints that the officers tried to recover, and then how many of those prints that they did recover were legible enough, readable enough. Just because we recover the print doesn't mean it's going to be classified, because it could be smudged or whatever else. And then we get a notification of what prints identified an individual. So that is the smallest number, though, of that. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, I have two questions. First of all, every time that as a business manager I have to call the police, they ask me if I'm part of the retail theft program, and I have no idea what that is, so I always tell them no. And then they send someone out, and they have to do the whole spiel. So I was just wondering if you could go over exactly what that is and how we can get involved with that and how that would help us as businesses. And then also, I do have an issue. There's an issue with just some homeless people trashing the front of our businesses. Just food and fecal matter and all that other good fun stuff. But we don't always see them. And so, what should we do in those particular cases as well?
How to get the microphone for this one? That's good. I'm not an expert on retail theft program. I'm just going to put that out there right now, so I might have to defer to Brass to give you the actual ins and outs and nuances of exactly how it works. So, Delta, you want to jump on that one?
I'll quickly say that the retail theft program, and it's surprising that they're asking, but it's a program that allows individual retailers it mostly deals with shoplifting. So and is that what you're calling on? Is it shop? Yeah. So what it is under there is that rather than an officer coming out, the program has its own security force or people that have been trained that are able to take the information, identify who the person they have. This person doesn't get arrested and sent to jail, but they're depending on how it's working, they take the information, the merchant does, and all of that is put onto a form that they're provided by the city, and they're provided a general offense a number that they will write that report under, and they're able to positively identify who the individual is. And so it's kind of like you're your own officer handling that particular thing. That report then goes to the city attorney's office, and then that person would then come in, be summoned at a later time to come in. So that's why they're asking, if you remember the retail theft program, chances are they're going to have that person and you're not. So, most like we have anyone from QFC here? So many of those large establishments are, and they if the criteria is met, in other words, a person hasn't assaulted anyone or done something, it's just, I've got a person that just stole a can of soup, and we do belong to the retail theft program, so you get the general offense number and you handle that.
So is that something you would recommend for retailers?
I think, really what I would say is that, again, there's that's handled by one of the detective units within the department. And I don't have all the specifics that takes place under that. So you can contact one of the officers up here later, and they can give them, your contact information, they'll get you send you the information on the program.
From a beat officer's perspective, when we handle these, a lot of times we'll get called for shoplifters at QFC. It could just be a hungry kid that did, it's a chicken wing or whatever, or like a $5 necklace or what have you. And being able to divert it through the RTP on that side is really, really beneficial, which is why people will ask, because a lot of times, yes, the referral will go through, but it's kind of handled in-house on the civil side of things. The only times we get called for those is if it's like a shoplifter with no identification, and we only get called in for the purpose of verifying the person is who they say they are, or it's a juvenile. And 9 times out of 10, they're walking, and they're not coming into custody for shoplifting a chicken wing or a $5 necklace. It gets handled through the program. It's more of a diversionary than going straight through the standard enforcement process.
And I know in the past, the department has offered shoplifting workshops for employees, so that you'll have officers come in and talk to employees about how to spot shoplifters or some of the common sort of tricks of the trade for the real pros. Do you still do that? Does the department still offer that?
That would probably go under the crime prevention program that we have, and our detectives, and if there's a Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce wants to bring together some merchants to have a specific workshop on that, we can arrange to do that.
Okay, great.
Okay. The second point you brought up about the trash and the refuse, yeah, just you can let us know about that. Where's your business?
Well, it's 2 locations.
Okay.
I personally work for one in the U district.
Okay.
One on Broadway, Red Light, Vintage.
Oh yeah, all right.
And so that we have houses in front of our
Yeah.
building where our doors are, and people sleep there, and that's not necessarily a problem.
Right.
Usually they're really respectful. That's not always the case.
And if they're not respectful, it's, we're scraping things off the walls and things like that. And my concern was like, especially at like the U District store, I found a whole set of Heron Works behind my place of employment, and I was told that I had to clean it up, which is fine. I went out and did that, but I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable sending just a regular employee to do that. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I absolutely.
And so I'm just concerned when there's like that kind of, there's a health issue, what can we do to either report that information so that, maybe just a couple people pass by a little bit more often, that type of thing, or, is there someone that we should contact specifically so that we can get that addressed?
Right. If it's a Broadway issue and it comes to like chronic problems and stuff like that, yeah, you can contact me directly, because that's part of my sector. I've got no problem talking with you. I'll give you my card after we get out of here. A couple other tips and tricks, just in terms of talking to people nicely. And, it's a really good start. And like I said, there's a lot of really compassionate merchants out here up on the hill that have no problem with people using their doorways. It's freaking cold out, and not everybody can get into a shelter, and that's understandable. And I respect the merchants that make that decision for themselves if it works for them. But it always gets to the point where it becomes a tipping point. There's a balance between being compassionate for your fellow human beings and, hey, okay, it's not okay that you're using my doorstep as a toilet, okay? So when it kind of cross that line, yeah, that's when you want to give me a call, most definitely. That request to watch that we talked about before. It's something you can come to the precinct and do. It's something you can email me about. We can talk about, when the officers have a little bit of downtime. If they, for first watch officers can swing by around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning about the time that I'm opening up. We usually don't have problems moving people along. Usually they're respectful. And sometimes Bob has a vendor the night before. He's a little bit more difficult to around. So we feel more comfortable if there's an officer around that they'll make sure that everybody keeps the peace and is nice and safe and moves people along. We can deal with that. The human remain, the refuse and all that type of stuff. I wouldn't want to expose my employees to that either. Sharps and so on and so forth. We can handle it to a certain degree, but we can assist you on that. I'll talk to you afterwards.
Folks know too, if you were Broadway, the Broadway Business Improvement Association has a contract with Cleanscapes to take care of bodily waste and remains and things like that. So you can call the chamber, or better yet, directly call Cleanscapes and tell them you're a member of the Broadway Business Improvement Association, which is all businesses on Broadway from Roy Street to Pine Street here, and then a half block on either side. And we have a contract to clean up those kind of things. So your employees don't need to be dealing with some of those things. Some of those things we can take care of for you. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me afterwards. The Broadway Business Improvement Association, and you folks are members, Jim? Yeah. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about the services the Broadway BIA offers. We're looking this year at expanding the BIA to cover more of the Pike Pine corridor as well. That'll take some work, but any help we can get from that from businesses to do that would be great. The Cleanscapes offers daily street cleaning, graffiti removal,
We can clean up things like human refuse and bodily waste. So feel free to talk to me about it afterwards.
Related question regarding bodily waste. Something we encountered once, and maybe things have changed since then. It's been a while ago, but we had somebody hit in an intersection in front of our business, and there was a very large pool of blood. And I called 911 asking for somebody to come and deal with it. And I was told, I'm sorry, that's something we don't deal with. And we had to wait until the rain came. Should that not have happened?
Testing. The reason why I'm going to comment on this is I spent my last 10 years with the detectives was in accident investigation, primarily the serious stuff, the fatalities, etc. So of course, in those 10 years, I saw a lot of blood in the street, and especially after cars have been removed, everything, and it's been real good to. And usually, as an officer, we just have the Seattle Fire Department comes out, and either they're going to use one of the small cans, they got some disinfectant, they wash it down, or if they need to, they got out on a hose and actually hose it down. So I would say just continue to call 911, or at the time, have an officer request the fire department come out and hose that down. They did it for many years, and I don't believe that's changed.
I actually paid for it. I worked in years. I had PTSD.
No, I'm really surprised to hear that.
So I also agree with you.
Hello, my name is Charles. I'm an independent filmmaker, well, I'm an amateur independent filmmaker. Don't actually have my equipment yet, but I want to start off by asking how many of the individuals in the streets that are convicted of trespassing or accused of by property owners are veterans of the armed forces?
Okay. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the crisis diversion facility. When officers, and this is a relatively new program, it just opened in August. But going forward, if there are any folks who are at the point where they need to start getting arrested for trespassing, our officers are going to be diverting them to the crisis diversion facility. And additionally, in addition to our municipal mental health court, we actually just started a veterans court for folks who are returning service members and they're suffering from some kind of mental health issue, or again, environmental issue where they don't have a home, so we can get them diverted into a housing program and get their needs met. So I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I know going forward we do have services, or if officers believe that there's a mental health component or the person's a veteran, there are other places other than jail where this person can get their needs met.
I think nationally it's 3 out of 5 homeless, but I could be wrong on that, most likely. But considering that the United States spends about $700 billion a year on war and preparations for it, and also the study from the World Health Organization and the United Nations and a couple other organizations, they found that in order for us to repair the planet, whether it's feeding people, giving them shelter, repairing the rainforests, that's only going to cost about $245 billion. And what I've been hearing a lot during this discussion is sort of a topical analysis, not really looking at the root of what's happening. And I feel like what's important for us to recognize is the power of community without being fearful of a person that is sitting or lying down in a right of way, we should be able to work together as a community to figure out our own problems. And yes, there are instances where individuals are scared and they're going to call 911. And also, we are participating in a human experiment. And what I mean by that is the concept of ownership and concept of property. So I think during this experiment, we should look at a very critical points of view to figure out what other approaches we can take to reorganize ourselves as a species on this planet.
You know, I appreciate that. I think that this is a piece of the human experiment right here tonight. This is a community. Quite honestly, we at the Chamber are all about community and this community and having an opportunity for you folks to all interact together. So I think this has been a fruitful discussion. I know that there are some people who want to sign up on the No Trash Fest and ask Casey about that, but I'd like to take a few more questions. So do we have other specifics? Aubrey, you have another question?
And we have about a half an hour left, and this is a business safety forum for our Broadway and Capitol Hill businesses, so let's keep it to the topic of it.
So maybe kind of saying something about that, about some people being scared. This isn't my business, but there's a business I walk past on my way to and from work where I've been intimidated by groups of people that are hanging around outside. And I guess this is a question that's important to that business, which is no one's doing anything illegal or wrong, but it is intimidating to see 15 people standing outside with a couple of dogs. And I've walked by a few times like, well, I want to check out this place. And I'll walk by, but it is, people aren't moving on your way. So it seems wrong to call 911. That just seems so, it's severe, And I know you're saying you call it and they'll send somebody out to check in, but what would be the best course of action if people are just not able to walk past a business, but no one's really blocking it, they're just hanging out there and it could be intimidating?
Well, I think that, anytime that, you're feeling fear for your safety, or if it's, again, it doesn't rise to a level where you are feeling for safety, but it's just kind of a nuisance. I mean, every time the police go out and have contact doesn't mean somebody's going to go to jail. We can go out and do boundary setting or make them aware and say, hey, you guys might not be intending to do this, but some people are complaining and the way you appear, it is menacing. So when you see people approaching, if you could give them a little bit more leeway or make sure we don't open or block the opening to the business, we have that conversation all the time. And that's something that we're very usually prepared to do. So again, every time we go out, it doesn't mean somebody's going to get in trouble. We can just go out and do some boundary setting and just kind of say, hey, look, this is the deal, and can we work on this together?
Also, while we're on the topic of calling 911, I know that there's some philosophical thoughts about calling 911, but we as the Chamber always encourages businesses to call 911 because it's our understanding that crime statistics are only reported when they're called into 911, and it defines the amount of officers in the neighborhood. Can you guys talk about that a little bit, what that means for business owners?
So, yeah, I think it's important to remember, as says, they call 911. It gives us an idea in the city of where the calls and types of police services are being requested within the city, and it helps us establish what we need in the way of resources for each particular precinct. So the 911 dispatchers and operators are very good at screening the information, sometimes to the displeasure of people that call because they think they ask a lot of questions. But that helps us get the right officers to the right location at the right time and what's needed. Going back to the question about, I think that Officer Nelson said on the every time we go out we don't make an arrest. We get somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 calls per year. And we have to work with those numbers throughout this entire city. And percentage-wise, very few result in arrest being made. So we do a lot of work that you don't see behind the scenes there, doing the things that he's talking about. We have a system in the city government to try and, under state and county also, with the diversion centers and going forward there. I think the challenge we face as police is that we're here 24/7. So oftentimes people think this is the role of the police, and to echo what the gentleman over here were talking about, it really does take a collective approach within our neighborhoods to work together to help solve this, because the police aren't going to solve everything out there by ourselves, and nor do we have the jurisdiction to go on to some things that you're talking about. Those are the things that are involved by other social service agencies and stuff. But we get called, so we come there. And it is important. Just because you're calling doesn't mean it's going to be making an arrest. That goes to Michael's point. Call us. It helps to drive numbers, not just where police go, but it also gives us an information about what is the homeless population, for instance, that we're dealing with on Capitol Hill in the East Precinct. What are we doing in the way of other areas where we might be encountering mental issues, individuals who have mental issues? That helps us to drive. And I can speak that the crisis intervention team officers that are there and the work that they're doing, they have a tremendous caseload, but they go out and they're very good about handling the individuals and getting them into the services they need. It's not about arresting them. It's about finding help for them and giving them an equal share of what's out there for them to be able to work and survive. So I hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, Cap, if I could dovetail off that a little bit as well to the gentleman from Capitol Housing that had the issue. You asked the question before, it's, well, is it even worth calling the police? Yes, this is something Michael and I have talked about before, is that, with our numbers unfortunately being what they are, even if we don't get there in time, all of those calls are tracked. Each precinct has something called a crime analysis unit, where we have a detective specifically looking at all of these stats, all of these figures, figuring out where the hotspots are. That's how we kind of figure where our directed patrols go, where we put our concentration of officers, so on and so forth. And I find that especially important, not just working up here on Capitol Hill, but especially in like Yesler Terrace and my neighborhood over in Little Saigon, when you're dealing with first generation immigrants, people that don't speak English as a primary language, and that's constantly the struggle and the learning curve is to really work with these communities to get them to call for whatever reason that they're not, because those are our communities that do become even more underserved and more underrepresented because they're just not even hitting the data points. So that is one of the more important reasons why, even if we don't get there in time, or if we miss it, or if it didn't seem quite right, but it's enough that you want us to see it, that's why it's important, because we track those numbers.
We run into that with our tenants in trying to say, if you're worried, call 911. And I call 911 no matter what, because I do know that it is tracked. It's getting the rest of the population, especially the population that we serve, which is a lot of the population that you just touched on, to call 911. My question was, why were they asking? They were asking me to wait. And I was trying to get well, what's the response time? Because I do have some appointments to get to. I'd be more than happy to wait and put a report in. It's part of my job. But I just didn't really have the time, and so it's like, well, I can't wait 2 hours. I have had a response time of 2 hours before, at 4 hours at one point. But I was at home, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Trying to get that point across that, a lot of times people don't call 911 because they don't want to go to jail themselves. They might have something pending. We run into all sorts of reasons why people don't call 911, but I do have a couple communities where they've started to build that sense of community. They started to, get to know one another, and you just see the rate of incidents just drop, because then there's eyes and ears around the property. I know when we met at the Chamber of Commerce, we had discussed possibly, or I had brought up the point that, a bunch of businesses could hire an outside security firm just to tour their building at night. Well, I didn't get a response from anybody. I passed out some business cards. I didn't hear from anyone. I did it myself. I called a security firm, and they're now touring 6 of my buildings, in the evening, and I was able to diffuse it. Normally, getting a security guard for a building it costs a lot. But when you diffuse it between 6 buildings or 12, all they're doing, they're driving by, they go into the building maybe 2 times a night, they just tour it, and it's really when people see that there's the vehicle outside, or they see the person in the lobby at one point, they're like, I'm going to go to a different building, because I'm gonna get caught here, or there's a higher possibility of getting caught there. You know, that being said, I had one building 2 days ago, someone, I kid you not, someone took off with the tops of the dryers. They took a crowbar, popped it off, and walked up. They said they were doing some repairs, but, they wanted the coins out of it. So security guards going through there, but incidents will still happen. It's just, but it is, like he was saying, it's building that community, because I've seen the impact it can have when people talk to each other, when the neighbors know each other, when businesses get to know each other. I don't know how many businesses go and say, hey, I'm 2 doors down, It's making those connections that I think is really important. So thank you for your time.
Let's take another question, and then let's wrap things up. Somebody else have another question to follow up on any of that? Any of the retailers have a specific question about doing business on the street? Any safety issues? Is there anyone that uses any private security? Yeah? First Covenant? Excuse me, and then we'll get to Diana. 1 second. First Covenant, you guys use private security firms. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, we were having a problem parking garage on Pike Street, and we were having a problem with drug use, well, you name it, all manner of activity, and having to clean up needles, human waste, etc., and some problem with cars being broken into. So rather than wait for the situation to get worse, it was like we had been discovered. So we changed our door codes and hired a security firm. They come by 4 times every 24 hours. And it has been absolutely worth its weight in gold. They're allowed to go places that the Seattle Police Department isn't permitted to go, private areas, non-public areas. And the other thing that we've gotten is really good reportage when our doors or equipment are out of order. We find out about it 9 times out of 10, not from our parking management company. We find out about it from our security company. And they have been responsive and helpful and absolutely worth their weight in gold.
Okay, that's good to know. And then Diana, from Vermilion Gallery, right?
Not so much a question as a comment. I've had my business for about 5 years, and it also happens to be a bar, and I'm a solo woman business owner. And I can say I've only called 911 maybe 3 times in the past 5 years. So I don't, I want to point out to the advocates and the filmmaker and everybody that I've come to this meeting mostly to learn how to do exactly that, community build, and avoid having to call 911. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody that came out.
Great, that's a great note to end on. So thanks, folks. Thank you, Officer Allen, all of the officers. Thank you all very much, officers. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Casey Sundin, if you're interested in the no trespass, Casey Sundin, the gray-haired gentleman at the table, has no trespass forms for you. And I'm happy to talk to you about the Broadway Business Association or the Chamber. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it.